So right now our models sort of look like this, right? They're a little bit bare. And when you look at some of the views that we created the other day, so for example, the sections, the elevations, we have the general basic elements, but we're missing things like the floors and the roof and the ceiling and, other kind of defining building elements, which, we'll eventually need, of course. And so today, I want to start by talking about floors, and we'll see how far we get with floors, and then I want to talk about, if we have time tonight, we'll see how it goes again. I want to talk about foundation walls, okay, and how do you put those into your model, all right? The first thing I want to say about a floor is an easy way to kind of think about the floor in a Revit model is that it's essentially a horizontal wall assembly, right? And I want to say it that way because, let me just come up here to my floor command. When I look at my different types of floors, right, I've got a bunch of them generated here. You're going to notice that when I click on Edit Type, we have our Structure button back, right? Lucky everybody here. So we're going to go back to not just defining things by sort of built-in elements, like, for example, a door. When you redefine a door, you define the height or the width, right? We're going to go back to defining assemblies. So when we create a new floor type, we're going to edit the type, duplicate it, rename it. Then we're going to redefine the structure, and then we'll use that in our model, right? And I think hopefully a good way of explaining it is that a floor is just a horizontal wall assembly because we know how to generate new walls. We know how to edit their assemblies, right? And so to create a new floor, to work with floors is just really identical to walls, all right? So that's kind of one of the first things I want to say. Floors, we're going to do something a little bit different in actually creating the shape of a floor, okay? Oops. Let me click on no here. So I'm going to, oh, come on. Yes, okay. So I'm going to show you what's called sketch mode with regards to floors and show you how to generate the outline of a floor and then create the assembly. Floors are going to be elements that host other items, right? So, for example, walls are an element that host other items, and they host things like doors and windows, right? Floors host other items like furniture and appliances and different things like that. So they are considered a host. When we create a floor, one thing I want to remind you is that just like a wall, we assign them to a level. And really just like anything in Revit, we assign them to a level, right? So if our floor is in the lower level, we assign it to the lower level. When we create one on the main level, we assign it to the main level, all right? Something we're not going to get hugely into today, but I just want to tell you that you have the option to do it in Revit, is that you have the ability to create a sloped, but also a completely flat floor, all right? And I'm going to talk also about, in a minute, I'm going to talk about sort of means and methods of how you can create floors. So that'll make sense when I get to it. The floor command is on the architecture tab. All right, it's here. And one thing I want to point out, similar to walls, we have an architectural floor and we have a structural floor. Okay. And for all of our drawings in an architectural model that shows design intent, you are going to be creating an architectural floor. And I say that because we're responsible for the architectural model, right? We're not responsible for the structural model. So our engineers, they're going to use these sort of structural elements to create structural floors once we've shown them where we want the architectural floor to be. All right, so we're going to create architectural floors. Really, let me just start out by kind of defining the best way of going about creating a floor. All right, the best way of going about creating a floor is to go into the view where you want it to be generated. And so probably a 3D view like this is not likely to be the best view to create a floor. If I wanted to create a floor on level 1, click. I'm going to go to level 1 and I'm going to create my floor on level 1. All right. If I have a level 2 or a 3 or a basement, I'm going to go to whatever level I want that floor to reside on and I'm going to create it in that view. Now, if I created in another view and I mistakenly created it in that view, I can move it to whatever level it needs to be in. But the nice thing about creating our floor on the level that it needs to reside on is that Revit sort of assumes that you want that floor to rest on that level, and so it sets that floor at that level for you automatically, right? Instead of you having to choose it. Okay. All right, so let's create a floor. I'm just going to run through it, and then I'll, of course, go through it again so you can kind of watch again and understand it a little bit better. Before I actually do get to creating a floor, though, I want to point out, well, I'm going to create a floor and then I'll point it out. Never mind. So there's something I want to define further. All right, so I'm going to create a floor. I'm going to come up here to architecture, and I'm going to come over here to floor. I'm going to choose architectural floor, click. Now when I do that, something that has probably never happened before in Revit for you it happens. The view sort of fades out, and I get this check mark and this little X up here, and my drawing tools pop up. All right. What has just happened is I've just entered sketch mode. So things like floors and ceilings and roofs, you're going to enter what's called sketch mode to generate those. Instead of like with a wall, it's kind of line based where you click, you enter the command, you draw line work to generate it. Okay. And the reasoning behind the idea of sketch mode is that very rarely do you have kind of just a square floor plate, right? This one specifically, like you look here and it comes and it goes down and it jogs in and it moves down a little bit more, right? Sometimes you'll have holes in the floor for stairs to go through. And so the reason we have sketch mode is because you have to draw irregular boundaries for floors. So we need the ability to very easily create those irregular boundaries, okay? So I'm going to come up here because it's asking me really to kind of start drawing something. And I'm going to click on the drawing tool that I want to use to generate this floor. All right, now I'm going to click on just the line tool here. Before I start drawing the outline of my floor, which is what I'm going to do next, I'm going to come over here to my properties dialog box, and I'm just going to double check and see that my floor is at level 1, right? So it's that, which is where I wanted. I'm on level 1. And I'm also going to, just like I would with a wall, I'm going to pick the type of floor I want to have reside here. So let's say that I want a 10-inch wood joist with a wood finish. Okay, looks pretty good. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to draw an outline of where I want the floor to be. So I'm going to zoom in here. Some of you maybe already are thinking what I'm going to talk about next, which is where do I draw that floor line, right? I'm going to talk about that next. But for now, I'm just going to draw it kind of to the inside of the floor. It's kind of magenta colored, so it's easy to see with the model grayed out, but I'm just going around and I'm sort of very nicely sketching, right? This command, I'm panning. You see I'm holding my middle roller and panning down as I sketch. If I hit escape, that just breaks my sketch drawing. It doesn't exit me out of the sketch mode command. I can come back up here, click on line, and I can continue on. Okay. If I accidentally make it crooked, I can use my modification commands to straighten it out. So align, click, click, and it's the way it should be. Okay. I can click on this and I get a little grip at the end, which I can hold, and I can drag if I want to make it longer, right? Or I could just click on my line tool again, snap to the end point of that line where I finished, and just continue on. I like to finish here where I started. So I have a nice outline of my floor here. Okay. Now these little, so you don't see it on every single one of the lines, but these little lines that look like this is indicating span. So this line up here and this one, it's indicating span this direction. We're not going to worry too much about changing that just yet, but that's what those symbols are, just in case you're wondering. Okay, so I've just outlined the boundary of my floor. Something to remember about drawing a boundary of a floor is that these boundaries function very much like a hatch region boundary, where they need to be closed. Okay, so what that means is that I can't have any gaps in my my drawing here. If I hit finish now, this, which is the little check mark, like, hey, I'm done, create the floor, I hit finish, it says, nope, these lines must be in a closed loop, right? Okay, well, so I'm gonna hit continue, and then I'm gonna come up here and either do a trim, TR, I'm gonna grab this and drag it up, or draw another little line right there. I'm gonna trim, TR, click, click, and everything looks good. Okay. So I've entered sketch mode, I've drawn the boundary of my floor, I've chosen the floor type that I want to apply to it, I've verified it's at level 1, so I hit finish. Look at that, we have a floor in our model. If I go into 3D mode, I can see it down there at level 1. Okay. If I go back to my level 1 and I look at my building section here, click, click, I can see that I have my floor there. Okay, so everything seemed to have worked really well, right? I always get a couple of questions at this point, usually from my construction management students, right? Because my design students don't really know very much about this just yet, but they look at that and they're like, that doesn't look right. You know, that's not where the floor goes. Or they start talking about leaving space for it in the levels, right? Taking into account the depth of the joist. Or is this floor include the structural floor and the finished floor? Or how do we deal with that, right? What if we want to change material? So I always start to kind of get some questions at this point because, let's see, I'll draw a little sketch here. So really, when you have like a house, right, we'll just draw this little foundation wall. We have our foundation wall. We have our footing underneath it, right? And we're going to have, you know, probably, let me draw it all the way up, actually, before I draw my floors in. I'm going to draw my wall system here. And maybe we'll just draw, well, there's not room for another one up there. But we'll do the same thing over here. Right? And there's always several different ways you can construct things, right? So that's our wall system essentially, and maybe our roof kind of comes up like this, right? But usually what happens is when we have our joists, again, depending on how you do it, because you can hanger them and do a lot of different things, but you're going to have kind of an exterior finish, whatever that ends up being, and then you're going to have your stud wall in here, right? We'll just kind of cross-hatch that for now. And usually what happens is, you know, the floor kind of comes in, right, and rests on the foundation at a certain point, and then also these stud walls come in and they sit on top of that floor, right? So usually the way that it's sort of represented now in Revit is not really very accurate, right? Your floor doesn't just kind of come in here and like very nicely rest on nothing, unless, you know, you could have a hanger, of course. But usually it extends into the wall a certain amount, right? And usually it extends into the wall until it hits the plywood, drawing a nice crooked line, and then the plywood just kind of comes down and covers that, and then you apply your finish, right? So I think my point with this is that when you're placing your floor, you want to really kind of pay attention to where the floor boundary is, right? And that's something that you're going to decide as you develop and design your wall system, essentially, right? For our purposes, I'm not going to get too particular as to where your floors are going, okay? But if you were to do this kind of professionally, right, this floor would extend likely all the way to where that stud right there is resting, and then the plywood would kind of come down, okay? All right. Otherwise, what's going to happen here is we're going to put a basement in our little cabin, which I think maybe you guys suspect, or maybe I've told you. But otherwise, you're just going to have a big gap right there, and then your foundation wall is going to be coming down, which is really kind of goofy looking, right? All right, so we have our floor there. Looks pretty good. I'm going to go back to level 1, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I think, you know, I really would like it if that floor goes to, you know, kind of where my plywood is. So I need to edit my floor. All right, So editing a floor sketch once you've created it is really easy. You just double click on it, all right? Click, click, and I'm bumped back into sketch mode, okay? Now, I'm gonna hit finish and get out of this and just kind of give you a couple of hints about your floors and selecting them. It's really easy to double click on it and to go back into sketch mode, all right? But one thing I want to sort of point out, a little hint on selecting these floors, is that sometimes if you just go in the center, it's getting, okay, so it's working, of course. But sometimes if you just go in the center of the floor in the field region and you click, click, you don't always select it very easily. Like if I click one, okay, it's happening now, of course. This doesn't always happen. Let me just preface this. If I click once, a lot of times if I click in the middle of a floor or a kind of sketched region like this, I don't always capture the floor immediately, okay? A really good way of picking elements like this, like the floors, the ceiling, the roof, is to sort of go near where there's an opening in the wall and to kind of hover near where I have drawn that boundary up against that opening, okay? So more times than not, these sketched items, floors, ceilings, roofs, are a lot easier selected at a boundary, okay? And not just a boundary, but a boundary at an opening. So if you're having trouble reselecting these to edit them, go near an opening and you can tab, tab, tab. See, it's getting the door, tab again, floor. Once you hit the floor, click, click, and you've just re-engaged it, okay? All right, that's it, you fail. Okay, so we're back in our floor sketch, and I think, okay, I want to edit the boundary a little bit, right? So I could do that. So if I wanted to, for example, change the shape drastically, I could change anything I wanted about it. If I wanted to bring it out and align it with that line of the plywood, this line of the plywood, I could. So I could type AL, align, tab, click, and align it, right? So that looks pretty good. AL, I can't really select it. Tab, click, align, right? There aren't very many of these, so I'm just gonna cruise around here very quickly. AL, tab, click, align, AL, tab, 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 tab. Oop, maybe need to move my mouse. Tab, click, align. Looks good. Come down here. AL, tab, click, align. And I'm almost done. I think you just have one more. AL, tab, click, align. And everything looks really good. Okay. So I've just finished creating, doing the alterations I needed to do. So I hit finish again, click, and the floor has just been altered. I go back to my sectional view, click, click, and now I can see that floor now kind of very nicely ending where it needs to end, right? Okay. So looks pretty good. Let's see, what if we want to change the floor type, the floor assembly? What if I just want to change types, not alter this, but change it? Well, I can click on it in any view, really. I can use my drop down and I can change it to 12-inch joist. There we go, and it grew downward, right? My location line on a floor is going to be the top of the flooring assembly, all right? So it's not going to be the top of the joist, it's going to be the top of the finished material that's been defined as the top of that assembly, all right? So it grows downward. All right, so that's pretty easy. What happens when I want to create a new wall or a new floor type, right? Well, I've just said that floors are a lot like walls in that they're a horizontal wall. They have an assembly, and just like walls, when I want to create a new wall, there's no new wall button, right? There's a, hey, I'm going to go and I'm going to find the floor that most closely resembles the new floor I want to generate. I'm going to select it. I'm going to hit edit type. I'm going to duplicate it, give it a new name. Let's make an exaggerated change here. We'll make that 20 inches, right? And instead of carpet, we'll say tile finish. Okay. So I've just edited it, duplicated it, renamed it. Now it says wood truss, 20-inch joist, tile finish. And then I'm going to edit the structure. Edit. I'm going to make the changes I need to, hit OK, and then that applies it to that new type of floor I just generated. identical process to creating a new wall, all right? And this assembly, this floor assembly, functions identically to the wall assembly. We have the finishes, 1, 2, 3, and sorry, not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have the finishes, and all of these things are numbered, right? We like them to be numbered sequentially, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on, you know, what side you're creating, or sorry, what assembly you're creating. But essentially, we start with a finish, we move downward towards having structure, and then a finish on the other side if we need it. Okay, so this one we're going to change the finish to tile, so not carpet. And again, this is just like a floor. I'm going to click on that little ellipsis. Tile. We'll do that. Okay, and we'll maybe make it like an inch thick, just to make it different. The structure here, you see there's 2 pieces of structure. So whoever generated this floor, they decided that the plywood sheathing would be part of the structural floor. And so we do have plywood, which is fine. And we're going to change the wood structure to 20 inches. Okay. I hit OK. I hit OK again. And my joist changes. So you see I have a 20-inch joist, 3/4 inch plywood with tile on top. So I'm going to pop into my 3D view and just look at it. I always like to do that. And there's my floor, where before it was a wood floor. Now you see all those little tiles, right? And I've got my little tile floor. Any questions on floors just yet? Okay. I'll create another floor. Let's do one at level 2. So I'm going to go to level 2. Looks pretty good. All right. And I'm going to generate a second floor here. I'm going to go to architecture, go to my floor command, choose my architectural floor, click on my drawing tool. I know that I'm in the right place because my drawing grayed out, right? And now it's just time for me to draw my floor outline. Now, I've chosen the line tool to do that, which is really easy. I can come in here and I can draw my lines as I need them, but I also could choose a pick tool, which is pretty easy as well. Another thing I'm sort of noticing here is that I don't have those wall striations showing my wall assembly. So I think now I need to change the coarseness level. There we go. And that looks pretty good. So now I can see all of my wall layers here. Now, one thing you're also probably thinking is I can see the floor below, right? And it's because the floor above, there's nothing to obscure the floor below, right? So essentially we can see from the main level, the upper level that I'm on, all the way down to the lower level. So that kind of makes sense. So I'm going to click on my little pick tool. I'm going to come over here, I'm going to tab, till I find the line I want, and I'm going to click, and it created my line. Tab, click, and it crosses over, so I do have to trim that up a little bit, but the pick tool is actually really easy to use, right? So we'll just continue on with that. Tab, click, trim, and you'll get really fast at this, right? Got my little pick tool, tab, click, trim, click. Oop. There we go, looks good. I could also switch over to my line tool if I wanted. Continue drawing. Oop, I can't snap very well. Maybe I'll just continue on with my pick tool. Tab, oop. Click, trim, click. And I've got my boundary almost generated. One more. Tab, click, trim, click. And everything's looking very good. Except, did I draw all those on the wrong side? Should be on the inner side. Oh, I think I did. We'll just align it. Can't have that. Yep. AL, align, tab. Good aligning practice. AL, align, tab. Oop, tab, nope. AL, tab. Okay. AL, There we go. All right. I've got my floor. Now it's time for me to just verify a few things, right? Because I switched to level 2 when I drew it, Revit just assumed I wanted that floor to reside on level 2. So I've got level 2 here. I'm going to choose the joist type I want, the floor type. We'll pick that new floor type that I generated. And I'll hit finish. And this is so would you like the walls that go up to this floor's level to attach to its bottom? I'll show you what this means in a second, but I'm going to choose no for now. Okay, so it looks pretty good, right? I'm going to go into a sectional view. Let's go down to my section, and you can see I've got my floor here and I have my floor here. Now that error that I got that said, hey, do you want your walls that go up to the level to attach to the bottom of your floor? See how this wall still goes up to level 2, even though now there's a joist in the wrong place here, or in the, well, it's in the right place. The floor goes up through, and that's wrong, right? So that statement that Revit made that said, hey, would you like these to go and stop at the bottom of that joist? That's what it was asking. And I said no, and I always actually say no to that now, because it's another one of my complaints. Like, I think this is another constraint that Revit allows. So if I had a bunch of walls on the main level and they, you know, there were 50 of them and they all kind of went through the structure, and I said, yes, attach it to the bottom of this floor, they would all then attach themselves to the bottom of the floor. And so if the floor moved and I didn't want the walls to move for whatever reason, now those are sort of kind of glued to the bottom of that floor, regardless of what happens to the floor. So at first I thought, oh my gosh, that's amazing, right? That's amazing. So I'm going to start doing that. And then I sort of realized after a few hit and misses that it wasn't as magical as I thought it was going to be. And so I stopped doing it. Okay. What I did instead of that was I added another level over here. Okay. So now, instead of just having, you know, level 1, level 2, level 3, we're going to have to start accommodating for our joist space. So we're going to have level 2, and then we're going to have bottom of joist level 2. We're going to have level 1, and we're going to have bottom of joist level 1. So that when I want to generate my walls, the top constraint of my wall is not level 2, it's the bottom of the joist level. What that does is it allows me to move that up and down, you know, as I need to, and those walls flex with the level instead of building elements. Okay. So I'm going to create a couple of new levels here. This is a good review. Level, LL. And I'm going to use my pick tool to create it. Click. And usually this is one of those things where usually I generate these before I get very far in the project, right? So in the beginning of the project, I'm assuming a lot. I'm assuming I have these specific levels, and I'm also kind of guessing at the depth of my structure at that point, right? 12 inches, 14 inches, you know, is it a slab? Whatever it ends up being, right? So I'm going to call this level BO, bottom of joist. Okay. And I do it lowercase so that I know it's not, even though I would know with the name that it's not a level, I do it with lowercase just so that visually I can remember that it's not a level that I want to draw on. And I'll create another level. I'm going to use my pick again. Click. Drag this little guy over. And this one's going to be bottom of joist. Oop, 1, I should have put a 2 on that. Bottom of joist, level 1. And this one should have been bottom of joist, level 2. Okay, there we go. So now when I define my walls, right, instead of going from level 1 up to level 2, it's going to go from level 1 up to bottom of joist, level 2, right? Looks pretty good. All right. So kind of some tricky things, but we're going to kind of figure it out. I should probably create a basement level here. If we get to foundations today, we'll add another level into your little cabins, but if we don't, we'll just save it for Monday. But I'm just going to do it just in case we get there. But I'm going to create one more level, and I'm going to call this, oh, does anybody know what happened there? Why can't I see it? It's tricky, right? there. Why can't I visually see that level? This will happen to you guys. It's because it's outside of my crop region, right? So I have this crop region that's very snug up against the building, and it's essentially masked out. Oh, I already had a level down there. I'm going to undo that. It's essentially masked out that lower level that I have. So oh, what did I just do? Level 3. We'll delete that. Okay. And right now, you know that maybe this is my basement, so I'll call it basement, of course. Okay. And I'm going to decide how tall I want my basement. So I'm going to maybe draw a dimension here. And we'll say that, and I didn't draw it from level 1, I drew it from bottom of joist because the ceiling is going to start here, right? It's going to be my ceiling height. Maybe I want this to be 9 feet. Okay, so you see that as you continue on with your model, you start to refine things. Things have to be moved. You have to add new levels, right? There's more definition that continues to go into your model. All right, so looks pretty good. We know how to use the floor command. We know how to use sketch mode now at this point. We know how to assign a type of floor to our floor that we're going to generate. We know that when we use sketch mode, it has to be a closed region that we sketch. One other thing I want to show you about our floors or sketch modes is that you can create openings in them. So for example, on the main or in the upper level, level 2, if I go here, I know that I want to have stairs that go from the main level to level 2. And in order to accommodate that, I need to have an opening in the floor. All right. This model, something you're just going to have to continue to remember about Revit is that this is it's a built digital model, right? And so if you have stairs, the stairs don't just go through the floor. You have to frame out an opening and the stairs go through the opening, right? So the same thing with your digital model. You have to create the floor and then create an opening in the floor for the stairs to live in, all right? One thing I want to point out here, do you notice that I'm seeing a view of the floor below me, but I'm on level 2? And I'm still seeing, I guess this is actually our floor up here, but I think that we're getting a hint of the tile below. We just can't see it. But I'm able to see these walls, and they're on the lower level. I liked that. I would like that if maybe I was trying to coordinate something on the upper level with the lower level. But right now it's just kind of annoying. I don't really want to see those things. Okay. The reason I'm seeing kind of a ghosted outline of the lower level items is because I have what's called an underlay turned on. Okay. So over here in my properties dialog box, if I hit escape, and I escape out of everything, I'm not in a command, you'll see underlay. And right now it shows me that the base level I'm looking at is level 1. Let me see if I can get a graphic to pop up. Shoot, I thought I was going to see a graphic pop up. All right. Oh, good. Okay. All right, so essentially, see those colored graphics? Number 1 is the bottom of the underlay bottom. So what level does my underlay view start at? So this graphic is not super helpful. Okay, let me find a different graphic that is actually going to be a little bit more helpful. Even though this isn't the same command, basically, the bottom is this blue range. So if the underlay says the base level is 1, this is my base level. And if it says the top level is level 2, then level 2 is my top level. So I'm able to view this entire blue region. So the base is 1, the top is 2. That's the view range that I'm able to see with that underlay. So essentially that underlay allows me to see, you know, all the way down through the floor to level 1, and I can see those walls down there. So that's what's happening with my underlay. So here I'm just going to choose none, and you see it turns off. So now I can just see my level 2. All right. So how do I create openings in my floor here? What if I want stairs to grow through my floor, which happens all the time? Well, I need to edit the sketch in order for that to happen. So if I click on my floor, I bump back into sketch mode, I can come in here and I can just sketch an opening. Kind of a little island in the middle of my floor, right? If I had wanted to make this on the edge of the floor, like the stairs were along this wall, I could have taken this and gone like that, right? Trim, 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 and that would have left an opening as well. I'm going to undo that real quick and go back to, here's my opening in my floor. Okay. The reason I can do this is because I've created a secondary closed region. So the boundary here is closed, meaning there's no gaps in it, and then there's no gaps in here. There's no gaps in here, and this line or these lines and these lines down here don't overlap. So the lines can't overlap and they both have to be closed regions. I can make as many of them as I want. So if I wanted to put another set of stairs over here, I could do that. Okay, I hit finish. I go into my 3D mode and I can see that I have some openings in my floor. Oh, what is that? Oh, that's the floor below. Kind of a little bit of a visual trick there. Okay. So when we get to stairs in a couple of classes, 2 classes I think, so next Wednesday we'll talk about stairs. It's good to know that you can create these openings that your stairs then can go through to get to the different levels. Okay. All right, any questions so far? Everybody looks super tired tonight. We all need a break, huh? You had what? I heard about the midterm, yes. Yeah, you guys have had interior design has had a tough day of midterms, huh?
Yeah, especially in this class, I took serious because it's kind of complicated.
Yeah, that's what I heard. It was kind of a tough one. Oh gosh. Oh, you'll do fine, I'm sure here. All right, so I've got my floors in. I've been able to create openings in there. We know how to create new floor types. We know how to assign new floor types, okay? If I wanted to change this floor type from, you know, the 20-inch joist to the 10-inch joist, I just click and I change it, all right? And I'm gonna go and look at my section and see what implications I have there. Well, it did change. It still lives at level 2, but now my bottom of joist has changed, right? And so I'm going to align AL, that level that I just generated, level bottom of joist, I'm going to align it to the bottom of joist. And now those walls very nicely go up and they just rest underneath the floor, which is kind of what we want. We don't really want them to attach. It's just another constraint that causes problems. Okay. All right, I have 2 more things I want to talk about with regards to floors. The first thing I want to talk about is what happens if you want to create several flooring types within a level, right? How do I do that? Because right now, if you look at level 1, right, the floor type that I've used, let me click on it, see if I can grab it, right? I'm going to hit edit type and hit edit. Right now I have VCT tile built into my finish, which means that, you know, there's VCT tile through this whole main level. But what if I wanted to put hardwood flooring in the kitchen? Yeah, so essentially you'd have to create new flooring types and do a new boundary for each room, right? But the problem is that if you think of kind of the traditional floor assembly, you kind of you'd create, well, okay, so sorry, I was misunderstanding what you said. I understood what you said, but I was thinking of it in a different way. I was thinking of you saying, well, let's just draw another floor on top of this one. But what I think you were saying was, well, I'll just take my boundary and I'll sort of just cut a chunk out of the main floor, right? And then you'll replace that, trim, TR, replace that with a floor with a different finish, right? So I'm gonna hit finish there, and then I would create another floor right there, right? So that's maybe what you were saying. Okay, so I'd click on floor, I'd hit architectural floor, and I would outline my floor again, starting where I sort of cut it off. But number one, where do you cut it off, right? Mid-wall, on one side of the wall or the other. There's some weirdness in sort of how you chop up the floor, right? So that's always one kind of big thing that is weird about doing it like this. The other weird thing about doing it like this, because, you know, I started using Revit a really long time ago, so we've sort of experimented with like a bajillion different ways of going about doing what I'm talking about. Another sort of, so that works. First of all, let me go back to this. That works. Let's change the fill to wood floor. Okay, so that does work, right? But the weirdness that happens with this is that if you have to move things around, it just sort of makes it difficult to keep things cohesive. Okay, if you have to tag items, detail items, if you're realigning things, you just have to remember that, hey, oh, I have that other floor. So if I wanted to change this to a 12-inch joist, not only would I have to make a new type of floor for this, I'd have to make a new type of floor for this. So essentially I'd be adding several different floor types every time I wanted to change the structure or make a move like that, right? And then on top of it, these pieces are just not cohesive. So if I have to move them or change them or do something to them, I have to make sure I grab all of them to make sure the moves are cohesive. Okay. So I don't like that because just for those reasons. So I'm going to undo that. We're going to go back to the way we had it. What I like about how things are now is that I have one continuous floor, right? It's all one piece. If I have to edit the structure, I edit it one time and it's good. But what I don't like is that I have, you know, a full spread of tile through the whole place, okay? So the system that, you know, we've sort of found works the best in this case is to do this. Let me just show you real quick. Is to create what's called a structural floor, all right? So you draw in just the joist and the plywood as a floor. And we forget about the finish in our floor assembly. So I'm going to click on my floor assembly. I'm going to hit edit type, edit my structure, and I'm going to get rid of that flooring. Delete. Okay. All right. But what that means now, I have a really nice cohesive structural floor that's running through the whole project, which is really nice, right? But what's not nice about it now is that I don't have any floor finishes. Or wait, where we do? Just kidding. What am I looking at? Did I change the second level floor on accident? Yes, I did. Okay. So I don't have any floor finishes, which I need floor finishes for finished floor plans and, you know, different things like that. So I really want to have the finishes. I'm going to go back to my main level and change this one so because we have walls and stuff here to better work with. It was the wood finish. There we go. So the best system that we've sort of come up with to make this easy is to create a structural floor and then to create a second floor that is the finish that goes on top of it. So with a lot of projects, you essentially have two floors that you draw, and that is in the case that you have different flooring for different spaces. Right? So you have a structural floor and then you have a finished floor essentially. So what I would do here is I would go back to my level 1 and I would create a new floor type. So click on floor and let's just see what we have here because I haven't created any in here. I'm going to hit edit type, duplicate, we'll call this wood floor. Well, maybe we'll call it tile. Okay, I'm going to edit my structure. I'm going to get rid of this finish, delete. I'm going to get rid of this plywood sheathing, delete. And I'm going to edit my structure just to be the tile floor. Okay, so tile, we'll do the 4-inch tile. 1-inch tile. And you're thinking, well, tile isn't a structural element. Revit's not going to like that, right? But it doesn't matter. Revit just needs a defined structure. And in this case, the tile is the structure, and that's all we need. I hit OK, OK again. And then I draw the boundary of where I want the tile to be. Maybe I just want the tile in the bathrooms. Right? There's a good tile. I already just changed my mind. We'll put a little in the kitchen. Oop, I didn't quite get it where I wanted. AL, align, click, click, finish. And there we go, right? So now I'm able to have tile in here, tile here. Now I'm going to create a wood floor finish type. I'm going to edit the type, duplicate, wood floor tile. That doesn't make any sense, does it? So we'll just call this one wood floor and change the name of the other one. But wood floor, edit, and instead of this being tile, we'll change it to wood. Let's see, wood oak flooring. Looks good. Okay. Okay again. All right. I just changed those because I had them selected. But now, I'm going to change those back. I want those to be tile. There we go. Now I'm able to draw the rest of the floor with wood floor. Okay. So I click on floor, architectural, and then I would just draw my boundary. Now the wood floor is obviously just going to live inside the walls, right? So it doesn't need to go into the wall system. So now it's just a matter of me going around and outlining those areas that need a wood floor. So I'll just do this one in the bedroom so you can see. And hopefully that kind of lets you understand. Now, the good thing about this is that it allows me to have a cohesive structural floor, which is what I want, right? The bad thing about it is that I sort of have to have two floors again, right? Although the kind of finish on top of the floor is less important than the structural floor, so I'm maybe not quite as worried about it as I am the structural floor weirdness. Right? But the perk of this is that I get to pick and choose where I want the finishes, right? Another really kind of nice feature of this is that sometimes, like if you have a concrete slab, you want to be able to turn the finishes on the floor off so that maybe you show control joints or something happening with the structure of the floor, right? So you can turn the finishes off, do a control joint plan on a commercial project, and everything works, right? So there's some niceness about the way this system works. Okay, this is a good system, and also what I really like about this system is that it will show up in your section. However, we have to be aware of that a little bit, because now I have my structural floor, but do you see my little tile floor is living below that? I've got to give it an offset now. Height offset from level, 1 inch. Oh, what did I just do? So that in my sectional view, I can see it there. Okay, or I have to offset my floor down. That might, in this case, might be a better way of going about it. Or I have to just make sure I offset my floor down, -1 inch. So that my floor finishes show. There's not any here, so that's not showing. But there's my, looks like maybe my tile. There we go, my wood floor. And there's no finishes over here, okay? So they show up in section. Another way that we've done this, which is probably on equal footing with this way, and we're not gonna learn this in this class because it's a little bit advanced, but another way of going about this would be to apply a color scheme to your floor. And a color scheme will allow a pattern to be read, but not give a thickness and apply a floor to it. So instead of showing an actual floor with a 1 inch thickness, right, I'm showing my structural floor, and then I'm essentially applying a hatch to it. So it's showing what it needs to show in floor plan view, but in sectional view, it doesn't show what it needs to show, right? And even though the flooring is just ever so slightly thick, I still think it's important to show it in section, right? So it's taken into account. AL align, I'm going to align my level to my floor again, and everything looks really good. Okay, I'm going to go to my basement level, and even though I don't have walls in my basement level, I'm going to turn on my underlay so I can see the level above. Base level will be basement, and then I want to see all the way up to level 2. Let's see if I can make this work. There are my walls for my main level. I'm going to draw a basement concrete slab in here. Let's create a concrete slab floor. So I go to floor, architectural, and I'm going to change this to, let's see, I think we have, oh, there's concrete on metal deck. Okay, that sounds pretty close to concrete floor. So I'm going to edit type. I'm going to duplicate it. So let's say this is a 4-inch concrete slab. Edit type, and I'll get rid of my metal deck there. I'll delete that. We have concrete, 4 inches. Okay. Oop. Looks good. Okay. And I've just created a 4-inch concrete slab floor type. Now I'm going to use my drawing tool to just kind of outline the boundary of my slab. I don't have a foundation system in there yet, but I can still draw the floor in. I know where the walls above are. Things might change a little bit too, but we know how to change floors, change the outline. Okay, hit finish. And there's my concrete slab. Now, if I go into 3D, it's really going to look odd because I just have this slab sort of, you know, hanging out down there. But that's how we're going to create floors. Okay. Your assignment for floors, I think I'll hurry and just show you how to create. I'll show you how to create the concrete foundation walls tonight quickly, and then we'll go over them again when we meet first thing next time as well. So you're gonna have an assignment for floors. It is on Canvas, miracle of all miracles, right? And essentially you're gonna do what you did what you've done with most of the assignments, which is you're going to create a few new types of whatever we have been investigating, right? You're going to draw a floor, and then you're going to assign those flooring types to your new floors that you generate, okay? But before we do that, before we stop, I just want to show you how to create some, yep?
What about the door opening? How will be an area between 2 rooms empty from the floor?
The door openings?
Yeah, from the floor plan.
For like level 1?
Yeah.
What do you mean the door openings?
So between the rooms here,
Uh-huh, yep.
That's, if we make, if we put a floor here,
Uh-huh.
this area will be
Ah, yes, that's a good question. So she's saying, well, wait a minute. If I draw a floor here and I stop there, and then I draw a floor here and I stop there, there's going to be a little gap under the door, right? So really what you would end up doing is you would draw this to wherever you want your flooring to end, right? It can be at the midpoint of the door. I'm going to split that line right there and then trim it, TR, like that. It just depends on really how your flooring is running, right? You could have your flooring running and stopping, and then this flooring goes into the door, or you could do halvesies, right? So I've got half my floor running to where the threshold is going to cover, right, where the door swings, because if the door swings shut, it will cover that, and then the other floor will be outlined and come into there and just meet it. Yeah, that's a good question. Okay. So I want to talk about foundation walls really quickly, and they're not really hard to create. They're just, it's a little bit tricky, all right? And they kind of form backwards than what you would normally think, all right? So I'm going to go to my wall command because a foundation wall is a wall. I'm going to click on wall architectural, and I'm going to create a concrete foundation wall type. So I'm going to first look for, oh, we do have a foundation wall, so it's 12 inches. I'm going to edit type, duplicate, and create an 8-inch foundation wall. Edit type again. We're getting very used to doing this. 8 inches. Okay. Okay again, right? My intent with showing you this is not that we, you know, create foundation and floor and foundation and footing plans, right? The engineer essentially is really in charge of that, but you have to show where the walls are in your floor plan views for design intent, right? We can't design the lower level without showing where the concrete walls are that sort of enclose it, okay? Now, I'm going to create my foundation walls in my main level floor plan. I'm going to create them in the level above the level I want to view them in, all right? And the reason I'm going to do that is because foundation walls are a little bit different than regular walls in that when they are defined, they define from the top down instead of from the bottom up, okay? It's so confusing. And sometimes this is one of those things where I always forget the top and bottom constraint. I have to do it a couple times, you know, anyway. But the idea is that you have a main level like this, and these walls on the main level start here and they grow up. And our foundation walls are going to start here in Revit and grow down, essentially. It's kind of how you want to think about it. Okay. This is one of those really specific things too, where we generate them and we kind of get them in the right spot, and then we have to go back and revise them so they're in the exact spot they need to be in. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to close all my hidden windows. So I'm going to have level 1, and I'm going to pop open a 3D view, and I'm going to WT window tile so I can see my 3D view next to my floor plan view. Okay. I'm going to initiate my wall command. I'm going to pick my concrete foundation wall, and then I'm going to choose my, hopefully I do this right the first time. My top constraint is going to be level 1. And my base constraint is going to be the basement. Do you see how it did level 1 and it gave a 12-foot offset to level 1 to create that foundation wall? That's what it was doing when I was talking about it grows from the top down. So I'm just going to change that to 0. So we're on level 1. I want my top constraint to be level 1 and my base constraint to be basement. I'm going to use my picker tool to create my foundation walls, and I'm going to start creating my foundation walls by clicking on the outer wall of my main level. All right, now I'm going to start getting some errors, and it's going to say you cannot see this wall, it's not being generated in a level you can see it on. And that's okay, because I know that I can't see my foundation walls for my main level, but I can when I go down into my basement eventually. So I'm going to start click. You see how it formed? But it says, hey, you can't see this. What's going on? I'm just going to start clicking all the way around my outer wall. And I know I'm doing something right because I can see them forming. But I know that visually I can't see them on this screen. Okay. And I was kind of drawing them blindly. Like I said, I couldn't quite get them in the right spot by clicking around the edge of my foundation. But I can see that I generally got them the way they needed to be. Let me click this out. There we go. I can see that I generally got them where they needed to be. I can see that they are where they need to be in the whole scheme of things, right? And I know that I can align them and get them in the right spot. All right. So I'm going to use the align command in a way that we haven't before to get these foundation walls where they need to be. So I'm going to use align AL, and I'm going to align by face. You see how my mouse wants to click that boundary? Well, I'm not going to let it. I'm going to hover over here on the face of this wall. I'm going to tab, 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 till I actually see it snap to the top and bottom. Click and see it grab the face of that wall. I'm going to come over here and hover and click on the face of that wall, and they line up, which is what we want. AL, we'll go over this again next time. Click. And you see I can't select it from the center to see that. There was my error that I wanted to work, right? Align AL, click. I can't quite grab it here, so I go up near a boundary, an edge, click. Escape, escape. AL, face of the wall, click. I can't quite get it. I don't see anything highlight, so I hover down here. You see that? Click. AL, click, click, AL, click. And for whatever funny reason, I'm able to select this wall up here from the middle, right? AL, I can go in the middle and click, but for this foundation wall down here, it doesn't like it. So click again, and then I've got my nice foundation wall, all beautiful, looking wonderful, around supporting my building as it should, right? So now when I go to my basement level, I have a foundation wall. I'm finding that my slab is a tiny bit too small. Click, click. AL. See, this is where you're sort of really starting to maybe realize how much revising you do in Revit, right? So when I say, I try and get things in generally the right spot, and then I have to go back and alter them, which sounds completely like a backwards workflow, right? But it just really happens. AL, align, click, click, AL align, click, click. I revise my slab so it's where it needs to be. I hit finish and everything looks good. I've got my overlay in this case turned on. I shut that off and I've got my basement. Any questions on that? We'll go over that again next time, first thing. And next time we're going to talk about ceilings. So we're just really going to start moving through a lot of building elements over the next few weeks. Oh, no, you have a question? Okay. Any questions on anything?
So, looking at like the MU class or whatever, it shows a crawl space.
Yeah, it does. So I'm going to change it a little bit, and I'm going to give you guys a basement to draw in there. So, yeah, for now. If you want to start forming a basement, I'm going to, with the imbue, this is my intent with the imbue cabin. I'm going to, let's go to assignments. So I'm going to assign your late term project here pretty quick too. So when we get back, it'll be due in a couple weeks after we get back. But some of the things, I'm going to make a couple changes to the cabin that you'll be required to do for your assignment. Because the cabin does have a crawl space under it. Let's go to one of the sections. Right now, this little cabin doesn't have a lower level. And so you see it just kind of has a crawl space under it, okay? So for your late term project, and if you want to start doing this, I'm going to, and I think I'm just going to pop this wall south probably about 3 feet. I'm going to have you move this wall down 3 feet, and you're going to put a stair in that corner, and we're going to add a basement, and you're going to access that basement through those stairs. That'll be the changes I'm going to make for the midterm. So if you wanted to start putting foundation walls below these walls and adding a basement, even though you don't know how to do stairs or anything yet, you could start doing that. Okay? Okay, that's a good question though, right? Any other questions? All right. Well, enjoy your fall break.